Welcome back to another edition of Rank Punditry. You know the bad news is bad when you got to call on Jim Merrill to help you out. Longtime GOP strategist, now with Bernstein Sure. Mr. Merrill, how are you, sir?
Always good to be with you, sir. Good to be here.
I know. I appreciate your insincerity. That's always the highest form of flat. Look, when people feel like they need to say it, it's a lot more sincere than if they really mean it. So it's really good. And I just got to tell you, I know that New Hampshire Republicans, when you talk to them, they're like, I feel pretty good, looking pretty good. I don't know what to do when you get yet another round of numbers like this Saint Anselm Survey Center poll, which is unlike UNH, which uses a panel system. This is an actual random person poll. And I just want to start with the Republican numbers, Mr. Merrill. Trump's approval is down to 37%. And more voters say they trust Democrats on the economy than on Republicans. Can you put that into context for for background here in New Hampshire politics?
Yeah, those are some serious headwinds that Republicans that are facing, and as we kind of come into the primary and then a general race shortly thereafter. Look, the president's numbers have never been strong here. His brand is not a New Hampshire brand. It's been a struggle. But right now, with the cost of living and with the war in Iran, there's just a lot of noise right now, and it's an off year. It's an off year election, a midpoint of his presidency. So I think Republicans feel good, and I think we have reason to feel good in part because Governor Ayotte's a strong candidate, a well-funded candidate. It's got a great record of success. I think people, and I say this again, as always, with respect to Scott Brown, but people are excited about the campaign John Sununu is running.
Right.
And so I think they look at that at the top of the ticket, and they know that voters have often been able to kind of bifurcate federal issues versus state issues. So I see, but we can't be unmindful of the fact that those are really harsh numbers for us to deal with.
Yeah, it really is. On the one hand, you've got this force of gravity that's so strong. Just look at the generic number, Jim Merrill. If the election were held today, 52% say I would vote for a generic Democrat, 41 generic Republican. That's an 11-point mark. You talk to campaigns, usually it's when you get to a generic +5 or +6 that they think their team is in real trouble. So that's heavy anti-Republican gravity. But just as you just pointed out, Governor Kelly Ayotte seems to have been able to get enough boost, with the voters to get escape velocity. And I think people hope that Johnny Sununu, with his the power of his last name, his family's tradition of service, with his kind of messaging that's very much I'm independent, I'm about New Hampshire, I'm not about Donald Trump, they can break through. But still, we are in 2006 territory, at least when it comes to the atmosphere. Would you agree?
Potentially, yeah. Absolutely. Look, in 2006, we had the latter half of George W. Bush's tenure in office. In the wake of Iraq and Katrina, and look, those were tough times, and we struggled statewide, and we took a pasting. So there are differences today versus 2006, but look, we have a president who is very unpopular in New Hampshire, and is not going to be a draw. He's not on the ballot. As we know, when he's on the ballot, there's a unique coalition that comes out and lifts Republican votes. That's not the case this time. So stiff headwind again. I understand, and I feel I'm optimistic too in many ways, given the strength of Ayotte, the strength of Sununu, some of the accomplishments of the Republican legislature here. But nonetheless, it's a tough looking year.
Well, I'm not optimistic because I just don't fly that way. I tend to believe that what usually happens is what usually happens, and but we have been since 2016. It's been a strange universe. I got to admit that. 2022 is a perfect example. Republicans should have cleaned up. They ended up not having a very good year, in part because of Dobbs, in part because of candidate selection. I also wonder, what do you think of the argument Republicans need a Dobbs? For people who know what I mean, the Dobbs decision reversing Roe versus Wade really gave Democrats a big boost of energy in 2022, back when inflation was 9% and everybody hated Joe Biden. And it helped give them that escape velocity they needed because the atmosphere was so bad for them. Republicans needed Dobbs, the argument is. Could the DSA, could these Democratic socialists who are winning these races and people turn on their cable news and they see these crazies going, shut down the borders. I mean, open the borders and shut down the Senate and blah, 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 and I hate Israel. Could that be the Dobbs for Republicans that Democrats are handing them in this cycle?
Yes, absolutely, it could. And, I think if Republicans are smart, they're going to get microphones in the face of every DSA candidate in
Right.
America and then get it on national TV and have that bounce around here in New Hampshire. There's no question that mainstream Democrats are running away from those candidates, away from that messaging to some degree. I mean, and we're seeing some
Sure.
tack to the left, as you'd expect as well. But no question about it. I think they're deeply concerned about that. They're deeply concerned that they could steal defeat from the jaws of victory,
Right.
so to speak. So I think that is an opportunity for Republicans to remind of, it wasn't that long ago,
Right.
AOC was joking about woke 1.0 was crazy.
Yep.
It wasn't that long ago. People remember.
Mhm.
And so bringing that back up could be a very powerful message.
So I've got to ask about the race that I'm getting constantly asked about at nhjournal.com, and that is the first congressional district Democratic
Mhm.
primary because it has a big name in it. Stephanie Shaheen, daughter of U.S. Senator Jean Shaheen. Maura Sullivan ran in 2018, came in second. And in this, I think people have felt like there was movement. I love the fact that our fellow rank pundit, Caroline Mackay, who writes for the New York Sun and also does some New Hampshire Journal stuff, she posted on her Twitter feed yesterday, "Hey, I told you on the Michael Graham podcast the other day that it was, Maura Sullivan was a thing." And now we had that moment that people have been looking for, a poll that shows Maura Sullivan leading Stephanie Shaheen, admittedly narrowly. It's 26% Sullivan, 24% Shaheen. The big winner is still unsure at 27. But two things, and I want to start with the sizzle first and the steak. What did people in your universe? You hang out with all these political insiders, longtime people on both sides of the aisle. What was their reaction to, holy crap, Maura Sullivan really is beating Jean Shaheen? I mean, Stephanie Shaheen.
No, I mean it was a holy crap moment because there've been some indicators, right? I'll talk
Sure.
about that in a second, but it was a holy crap moment. This might actually happen because
Right.
I think that just the
Exactly.
conventional wisdom from the start, it's like people talk about Stephanie Shaheen for a long time. They've talked
Mhm.
about her as a statewide
Right.
candidate. Obviously it's a name that is synonymous with Democratic politics in New Hampshire, and everyone has just assumed, and we know that it's a
Mhm.
dangerous thing to assume. So it was one of those holy crap moments. But look, when you look at Maura Sullivan's fundraising, right, and you've
Yep.
you've been pointing this out from the beginning, quarter after quarter, Sullivan is lapping Shaheen, and
Mhm.
it's by a significant amount, and it's
Yeah.
sustained. And so it's said something about the sustainability of her campaign versus the Shaheen campaign. Look, I live in Manchester. I'm in the belly of the beast
Mhm.
here, in the biggest vote pocket in the first
Right.
CD. And I've seen increasingly in recent months Sullivan activity, Sullivan signs, prominent Manchester leaders supporting Sullivan. And it's all like kind of anecdotal data points. But
Sure.
when that AIPAC oppo drop
Mhm.
happened in the front page of
Right.
the UL, so followed by the ad, it was clearly in the can, ready to go. That was, the Shaheen campaign knew they were
Right.
going down, and they were starting to drop in the polls. Or moreover, I guess the Sullivan campaign was on the rise. So look, I think people now feel this could happen. This race is absolutely in play. It's interesting the progressive candidates haven't, Urrutia. I think and I was one of them that thought he might
Sure.
catch fire. Hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen. So I think get ready for haymakers over these next few weeks.
I absolutely agree. A couple things to follow up. Christian Roosh has been on TV and yet his poll numbers haven't moved, and that's just kind of surprising. Also, Carly Barrett, lecturer at Harvard, who's on the town board out in, oh, what's the is it
Hampton,
Hampstead? Hampton. I
Hampton.
apologize, Carly. You do a great job, but she's not campaigning to me, and that's kind of the
Yeah.
point. She's in double digits in this poll, and what I'm hearing is she's really been working groups. Like she's got groups, teams of people going out, connecting with their neighbors. She's also doing smart direct mail to likely primary voters, and so she's been under the radar, moving voters. If she emerges as the kind of the default progressive, if you will, that makes things interesting too, because now you've got a scenario where Maura Sullivan ends up winning enough of the establishment vote to come in first. Carly Barrett wins enough of she consolidates all the progressives. That'll definitely put you in second place. And suddenly Stephanie Shaheen's in third. I'm not predicting that, but for the first time, you can see that as a real possibility.
You can see it, and we've seen this so many times, right? Where the top two in the field begin to go at each other, and it's always about 4, 5, 6 weeks out, and then there's always a third party beneficiary, right? Someone is going to benefit because you're driving up someone else's negatives and your own negatives, and so that's now begun to happen as they begin to fire at each other. And I don't think anyone really predicted that Barrett would come through, but look, in a multi-candidate race like this, we kind of, people joke about grassroots campaigning. You say that as a dodge when you don't have, other data to point to. But in this case, it's paying off clear because we know she's not on social media. She's doing things, I think, in an old-fashioned way, but she's probably the purest on message. I think with Urrutia, I think you've mentioned this before, Michael, where he's an interesting case. He's an impressive guy, but he kind of presents with the military background, and that may just not be quite in lockstep with what a traditional progressive base is looking for. So in any event, but I think the story now is how does she close the deal? I think
so. What do you recommend if she called you and said, what do we need to do? Because I have an answer. I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, look, first of all, she's done everything right so far. I think people have been critical for her, but it's been a slow and steady burn. And now, so she's got to close well in the MUR debate. She's got to close well in any forums they have. Whatever their ad buy is, they've got to boost it, and she's just got to outwork her. I think the Shaheen challenge in part has been, and I don't mean this as a negative, but when you come in as the front runner, as the Shaheen candidate, there is it's hard to run a guerrilla campaign, right? It's hard to run like you're 3 votes down with 3 minutes to go, which is kind of what I was always taught. And so you take things for granted a little bit, and you assume it's going to come to you. And she's been stuck in those low 20s for months now.
Yep.
And so as these voters break, it's unlikely they're going to break towards her. So
I think you just said, it stunned me so much. You said something smart. I want to stop and highlight it. You pointed out that her numbers haven't moved. Look across the board. Warmington, numbers haven't moved. Shaheen, numbers haven't moved. In the first CD Republicans, Holly Novletsky had a slim lead in the last NA's poll. Her number hasn't moved. There are the candidates who are moving, Ayotte, Sullivan, and Anthony DiLorenzo, and then there are the candidates that are not. So it's not that the candidates are fading. It's just that they're not going anywhere compared to candidates who are. And I think that's the message of what's happened now that people are on TV and they're putting a lot of mail in the mailboxes. You're starting to see the messages that are working and the messages that aren't.
The candidates with resources are now able to express that in their campaign plan this last few weeks, and that's everything. And so I don't know how much the Shaheen campaign has left in the kitty here, but I know Sullivan, they've raised more money and they've been fairly judicious in how they've spent it. So I think they're going to have a spending advantage down the stretch, and that's a big benefit.
So if I'm the Maura Sullivan campaign, if they came to me and said what to do, I'd say you need a quote. What's the euphemism you throat cutting hardcore strategists use? Contrast ad? Is that what you call them? Compare and contrast. Yeah, she needs to land a punch on Stephanie Shaheen, politically speaking. The inevitability question is already fading, and now's the time to really hit her on it and to just get that off the table and just say, you know what, I'm going to vote on these candidates based on just what kind of candidate they would be. And that's a much stronger position for Maura Sullivan. She's done a lot. She has an impressive resume. She's also been working for the Democratic Party really hard since she lost to Pappas in 2018. She's been party vice chair. You know what I'm saying? Like there are a lot of reasons for Democrats to go, she's done stuff to earn my vote. And I don't know that Stephanie Shaheen has the same ability to compare. Now, you're talking about resources. I don't want to be mean to Cindy Warmington. She seems, I don't know the former executive counselor. She seems like a pleasant enough person, but you almost got to feel sorry for her. We had a piece ready to go yesterday on the woes of Warmington before the poll dropped because of all the bad news. What has happened to that candidacy?
Well, I thought, Carney's line to you was a good one that you had overnight, which is just this whole thing felt rushed. It felt forced. It felt reluctant. Everyone was like, well, where is she? What's happening here? Typically And you didn't see that typical activity, right? When someone loses a
Right.
close primary, they're not the nominee, but
Sure.
often you'll see them build their profile, put themselves out
Exactly.
there, like really just kind of
Mhm.
keep the momentum, keep the engine warm, right?
Right.
You didn't see that here. And so I suspect that after that primary, she's like, you know what? Okay, I had a good run and I'm done.
Right.
And then I think you had this conventional wisdom of like, well, we very rarely knock out a first term governor, and
Sure.
Kelly Ayotte's broadly popular. And so I think then people began to say, well, geez, well,
Mm.
Trump isn't, still president. He's unpopular. We should get someone
Right.
in there. It just felt all very haphazard, the way it's all come together. The fact that the Warmington video kind of explaining her very personal story about addiction and how it's impacted her, it took
Yeah.
months to get that out, knowing you're going to get carpet bombed
Right.
every day. So I just feel like this is a candidacy that was not thought
Right.
all the way through. The fundraising
Mhm.
reflects that. I think people invest where they think they're going to get a good return. They're going to see a quality candidate, a quality campaign. I think she's a good person who I think is running a very
Right.
replacement level campaign right now.
Yeah, think about how history could have been different. What if she had come out right after she lost to Joyce Craig and said, "I'm going to be the person who works the hardest to get Joyce Craig elected." And then, Ayotte gets elected, and then she's like, "I'm going to be the person who's leading the charge to make sure that Governor Ayotte knows we're watching her, and when she gives our money away to private schools and blah blah, I'm going to be there to get." Instead, as you pointed out, nothing. And then when it was time to start running, she didn't want to run. Then she
Yeah.
gets in the race, and then no one supports her. Mikey Sherrill is a governor in New Jersey, big time Democrat. She's here campaigning for Democrats. Who does she not campaign for?
Yeah.
Cindy Warmington. Warmington's finance for her financial report comes out this week. She spent more money than she raised as a major party candidate 2 months before an election. She has zero money from the Democratic Governors Association. Ayotte already has 2 million, and that's probably going to double by the time we get to November. Like I just, it's like she's all alone. Joyce Craig. She asked Joyce Craig, please endorse me. And Joyce Craig said no. What kind
Yeah.
of person does that? And
Yeah.
so I just, like I said, there's a point where it was kind of funny. Now it's not as
I
funny.
just look, I mean, this is a complex statewide campaign. It
Yep.
takes a lot of planning, a lot of parts that are moving in
Right.
unison to be an effective campaign. And that just hasn't happened here. It feels very much thrown together at the last
Mm.
minute. And
Yep.
I think she's taking one for the team here. I think she was, encouraged to do it. Hey, listen, we need someone credible on the ballot. And look, I think that whatever happens in November, I feel very good and confident about Governor
Right.
Ayotte, given her record and her ability as a candidate. It's not going to be a blowout. This is going to be close. And I know that the governor's going to work her tail off all the way through
Right.
this, but it could have been different had Democrats thought about this a little differently after 2024.
Look, when your president, the head of your ticket, has an approval rating of 37, if you can somehow win your election with, 54, 55% of the vote, that's a blowout. It just doesn't look like it because of the gravity. But
It,
I was telling someone said, what's so impressive about Ayotte's favorability now at 51%? So do you understand that with Trump underwater by 30 points, that 51 is like 67 in dog points. Like
yeah,
it's just
it,
amazing. The environment is so bad for
it is
Republicans right now.
it is impressive, and it deserves to have you put in national conversations.
Yeah, that's a very good point. National conversations. You got
100%.
gas above $4 a gallon. You're in the deepest blue part of the country. The media is, just knee jerk anti-Republican. In the middle of all this, you're handily handling the a former executive counselor who was, the a candidate for governor 2 years ago. It's something. If I were, say, a populist Midwesterner who had a tough time with women voters, and I was running for president, and I needed someone on the ticket to help me, I don't know that I wouldn't be looking to New Hampshire in 2028.
Uh,
Not
I
saying, just saying.
just saying, well, I agree with you. So it would be smart
uh,
politics, and yeah.
one last question for you. People in the state house and who are involved, lobbying, et cetera, they are very tuned in on this veto fight and the fact that Ayotte had the most vetoes of a governor of legislation from her own party. And then she also had the most overridden by a legislature of her own party. Having 7 vetoes overridden by your fellow Republicans. I mean, there's just no way to make that nice. Someone was saying to me, we're trying to spin this so it doesn't look like a big bleep you to the governor. And I'm like, well, then you shouldn't have voted the way you did, because it's a big bleep you to the governor. I mean, there's just no way around it, But does any of that translate? Like, for example, is that going to have an impact on the fight for Republicans and Democrats over the state House and the state Senate? Is it going to have an impact on Ayotte's ability to get support in November when it matters?
I don't think so. I mean, a lot of it's inside baseball. It really is. And look, I think from the governor's standpoint, she looks strong when she takes a position that is against where her party is, right? And so the Republican legislature has given her a few bills that she didn't like and didn't believe in, and so she expressed herself. She won more than she lost, but even in losing a few of the veto fights. It gives her that sense of independence, that she's above it all. You're triangulating, right? So I think it's a good message to voters that she's not a rubber stamp. She's an independent. She's a conservative, but she's an independent thinker, as we all know her to be. And so I think the legislature gets what it wants. She gets what she wants, and we're off to November. So I don't think there's any long-term repercussions there. I wouldn't be worried about that at all.
Once again, in a state where Republicans are unpopular, down by double digits, where Trump is down by 20 plus points, if you can be the Republican governor who vetoes some Republican legislation, and that includes stopping tolls, even though the tolls are only going to impact about 15% of Granite Staters, that's still 15%. That's 150,000, 200,000 people. And you've also stood up for law enforcement. You're owning that. I mean, I think the net outcome of this is all good for Ayotte's brand as a candidate who's trying to say, I'm a real Republican. I'm not, some Charlie Baker or Phil Scott guy, but I'm not a crazy Republican. I'm the kind of Republican that you tend to like.
Right. I mean, look, she's running statewide, and we've got a unique electorate, so she's got to appeal to a winning coalition, and that's a broad one. And so, look, I think our Republicans in the House and Senate have done a great job. I think the governor's done a great job, and I think her vetoes here. She stood up on principle. She's been very consistent on messaging about no new taxes and fees, and the arguments aside about the tolls and the park fees.
Sure.
Look, she was very consistent, and that's admirable. So. I think I think everyone got something of what they wanted there, and which is the best way to close it out.
Absolutely. I still don't understand the bathroom bill. That thing is wildly popular. Just let it pass. Don't even sign it. Just let it pass. I think that's a miscalculation. But in the big picture, will it matter? Everyone makes mistakes. For example, you chose to come on the podcast, Jim Merrill. And so everybody does something boneheaded every once in a while.
A chronic mistake I don't learn from, apparently. So.
Jim Merrill, Bernstein Shur, thanks so much for joining us here. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Michael.